It's your weekly dose of confessions. Coming up, a bit of this.
I've seen streaking in the BBC. I've seen it in the lifts, actually.
What? Alan Dedico's my guess.
And some of this.
Mr. Grimsdale! Mr. Grimsdale! Mr. Grimsdale!
Hello and welcome to another Confessions podcast. This week's concise collection of terrible tales include the persecution of the Norman Wisdom Fan Club, Egypt branch, the surprisingly self-soiling cistern, and some naked ambition in the Houses of Parliament. Who'd have thought it, huh? Tonight's confession comes from Brandy. Thank you, Brandy, who says, as it was UK Armed Forces and Veterans Week, culminating on Saturday, please could you consider an old airman's tale? So we do this. Father Simon and the Holy Trinity, I write to seek relief from the torturous guilt that has followed, nay, plagued my troubled soul for many decades, seek redemption and forgiveness, blah, blah. It was the late 70s, and in the early years of my career, in Her Majesty's Royal Air Force, that the deed of woe took place. While serving at a well-known large transport RAF station, I was a member of an aircraft servicing squadron, carrying out frontline day-to-day servicing and maintenance of the transport aircraft, keeping them in tip-top readiness for whatever humanitarian or military service we were engaged in at the time. As you can imagine, sometimes the world has short breathers from conflicts and crisis, and during these brief periods, the workload for us could sometimes ease off a little. These times are often taken by our superiors to catch up on minor and sometimes menial tasks that can sometimes be put aside during the more hectic periods. This was also supposed to prevent any pranks or mischief from the younger and more boisterous junior ranks that might get bored. One of these tasks was given to me, and two more nameless mechanics in particular. Annual checks and replenishment of the fire extinguishers used around our hangar and aircraft parking bays. One type of extinguisher is a foam type, used primarily in fighting fuel or liquid fires, and a very effective and impressive extinguisher it was too. Being a standard-sized hand-operated extinguisher, the vast amount of foam it could produce never ceased to amaze. This was brought about by the internal mixing of two chemicals when operated, setting off the required reaction, creating the foam and the pressure to deliver it. One of the duties was to replace the said chemicals, as they had a shelf life and did deteriorate over time. These chemicals, which we replaced very carefully and very separately, were a clear, colourless liquid, and the other a yellowy-brown liquid. I suspect we've taken out some names there just so you don't try this at home. At the end of a batch of such tedious duties, we were left with a large amount of time-expired chemicals for disposal, the correct method of which escapes me, as we always seem to find entertaining ways of losing them, to my eternal shame this being one of them. So obviously, if you do have time-expired chemicals at home, kids, don't do what these guys did. Did that sound okay?
Not that convincing,
okay.
Actually.
I can't honestly remember, says Brandy, if it was just me or whether or not, as usual, peer pressure and encouragement made me come up with this one, but the plan was born. We set about with military precision to lay a trap in the hangar toilets. With one of our team providing lookout, we turned off the flush cistern water supply valve in one cubicle, flushed it to drain all the water, mopped out the water in the U-bend, then refilled the U-bend with the clear extinguisher fluid so it looked normal. The yellowish liquid in the cistern. Clearing up any spillage or smears, we then vacated the toilet block, putting hastily prepared out-of-service signs on the other two cubicle doors. The scene was set. We retired to a discreet distance to await what happened. There was one false alarm caused by a fellow squadron member using the facilities, but not to sit down. But then one of our thankfully equally junior-ranking colleagues dealt with his bodily needs in the privacy of the one apparently serviceable toilet cubicle. After an appropriate time gap, we stealthily crept into the toilet block to hear the reactions of our prank, and we got, frankly, more than we anticipated. The eagerly anticipated cranking of the flush handle was heard, accompanied by a humorous snirk noise from one of my peers as the unstoppable wheels were set in motion. This was quickly followed by verbal expletives from the cubicle, then immediately by frantic scrabbling noises from within and a startling amount of foam from under the cubicle door. This scrabbling rapidly became more and more frantic in direct proportion to the height up the door frame that the foam had reached. In 10 seconds it had reached his waist. We know this because within 20 seconds it was coming over the top of the cubicle. Wow. It was spilling into surrounding cubicles too and coming towards us. The cubicle door was pushed open with great gusto and the shocked occupant and further foam surged outwards. The place was a complete disaster. Foam beyond belief, objects beyond description at tea time, and one confused and slightly traumatised fellow... Well, it would, wouldn't it? And traumatised fellow squadron member whose life had gone so horribly awry just after visiting the loo. If the lock hadn't been faulty, he'd have escaped earlier. As it was, when he emerged, he looked like the abominable snowman, with extra hundreds of...
whatever.
Oh, hallowed members, I do humbly seek forgiveness, not from my superiors, who should know better than to send us young aircraft mechanics on tedious tasks without supervision, nor for ourselves, as we were only having some fun. And to be honest, we were punished enough by having to frantically work 10 times harder to clear up all the evidence in the toilet block. In mitigation, I did go on to serve my country well, as did others in conflict and humanitarian duties around the world, earning a few medals and friends. Why, I even obtained my Royal Commission, and when times have required, have been appropriately lenient to those under my command for their minor misdemeanours, perhaps with a knowing smile as they left my office. So I'm thinking this is a senior airman now. Anyway, but he thought, there's nothing going on. Let's have some fun in the cistern. Let's smash the cistern.
If you're covered up to your head in foam, I mean, can you actually breathe? Could this have been
Well, I imagine it's got bubbles in it.
Yeah, I suppose so. And they have all those foam parties,
You
don't
can
they?
always wipe the foam away with your hand.
Yeah, it just sounds like...
Horrible.
Really, really horrible. And also quite a complex operation. I know they had time on their hands, these people, but it is slightly concerning.
Like I said, military precision.
Well, yeah, that's true. However, I'm always one for a good jape. And I also think the mitigation...
You did this kind of stuff at school, didn't
Well,
you?
not exactly. I mean, that was not nearly as disgusting as that, but yeah, we did that kind of stuff at school. And the mitigation worked for me. I mean, if he served his country well afterwards,
Yes.
then I am prepared to forgive. So,
Okay.
yeah, completely forgiven.
OK, Brandy, you're one up. Mother Superior now looking stern.
This is wrong on many, many levels. That was the first thing, I have to say, Rebecca, that crossed my mind. If you're up to your head in foam, you could actually suffocate, couldn't you?
No.
You could.
Wouldn't have
Come
thought
on.
so.
Well, listen, that foam...
All you have to do is wipe it away from your mouth and you can...
Yes, but there are places that foam could have gone up where you couldn't wipe it away. Or maybe you could.
Sure, but you don't breathe that. You don't breathe out of those bits.
Exactly. What happens if you got stuck up places that you couldn't get it down?
Have a shower.
Well, no, but it could have gone into orifices that it could have just stayed
foam.
there. And, no, seriously, I think it's a terrible thing to have done. Very highly irresponsible. And as far as I'm concerned, it could have been quite a dangerous thing, and you're not forgiven.
OK, so you're 1-1 at the moment. The casting vote.
My policy is always very simple on these things. If it involves anything involving an exploding toilet or something coming out of a toilet that shouldn't have been in the toilet, then I'm always going to forgive. Well done for coming up with foam coming out of the toilet, up and over the cubicle, indeed. Well done. And they all cleaned up afterwards, so, And he's not dead, so he's fine. So everyone came out of it alive, and just one of them covered in foam and whatever else.
So is that your ultimate step? As long as someone has emerged from a confession and still alive...
and an exploding toilet, then yes, that's definitely forgiven.
RAF confessions, toilet confessions... I'm not sure about that. Fire extinguisher confessions. There's so many things to choose from. Tonight's confession comes from Ted. Ted, thank you very much indeed for tonight's tale. Dear the Forgiveness Foursome, with the Arab Spring and the recent elections in Egypt, memories are rekindled of events over 30 years ago in Cairo. President Sadat had been assassinated, Hosni Mubarak had taken charge. In fact, the story's location is not far from the Royal Palace, in a posh suburb of Cairo. This is where 3 enthusiastic teachers armed with their degrees and dodgy TEFL certificates were living, which, as you know, stands for Teaching English as a Foreign Language. Life was great, teaching for a few hours in the day and partying at night. Our only source of irritation was the fact that the 10th floor apartment overlooked the Roxy open-air cinema. What could be wrong with being able to watch free films, I hear you ask?
A lot.
Nicely done. We'll rehearse that later. Well, the thing was, the cinema didn't show current blockbusters, such as Raiders of the Lost Ark or The Cannonball Run, but a block booking for 8 weeks of Norman Wisdom films. Week 1, Norman Wisdom film. Week 2, Norman Wisdom film. Week 3, Norman Wisdom film. I think you get the hang of this schedule. You thought he was only big in Albania. Despite the sound of the film booming out over the Cairo night sky, the most hilarious part was the sight of hundreds of Egyptians spilling out of the cinema and onto the dusty streets doing their best Norman Wisdom impersonations, standing in their dish dashes shouting, "You don't like me, Mr. Grimsdale." Oh, I'll do it like this.
Mr. Grimsdale! Mr. Grimsdale! Mr. Grimsdale!
So I guess the point of Ted's confession is, imagine that being done by loads of Cairo folk leaving the cinema going,
Mr. Grimsdale! Mr. Grimsdale! Mr. Grimsdale!
it would be funny. That would be a genuine moment. I'd like that. Anyway, it was hilarious at the beginning, but not so funny on the 23rd time. Even not so funny when on some occasions they would point at us on the streets and tell us that we looked like Mr. Grimsdale. One night after a few beers, made from onions, I later found out, we found a section of an old... Can you make beer from onions? Anyway, we found a section of an old large billboard poster on the road. We remembered our good student training mantra for traffic cones, take it back to the flat, take it back to the flat, take it back to the flat, and we applied it to this enormous poster. We dragged it back to the flat. Well, what on earth could we do with it? We asked each other. And when faced with flexible material, there was only one thing that we could do, and that was to make a huge cardboard plane. After assembly was complete, all we needed now was a target. I wonder. Yes, this Arabic space shuttle was launched off from the balcony through the hot Cairo night sky towards the Norman Wisdom fan club below. It soared, it circled, it dipped, and eventually landed, luckily for the cinema goers, on the stage. However, it created a real panic as people ran out of the cinema. Many thought that a foreign force had invaded or a Scud missile had been dispatched towards Norman Wisdom fans. There was complete pandemonium. People running round the streets in panic with soldiers appearing from the nearby barracks and traffic police arriving on the scene. Some of the shocked residents were looking up at us on the balcony, shouting abuse and pointing their blaming fingers in our direction. Looking back, it was a stupid thing to do. Oh, I should have done that. Looking back, it was a stupid thing to do. But no one was injured, therefore we beg forgiveness for 1. Causing distress amongst innocent members of the Cairo Norman Wisdom fan club. 2. Causing calamity in Cairo's already congested streets. 3. Maybe creating propaganda for Mubarak's regime, which meant free elections were put back 30 years. I think you're probably pushing it a bit better. I don't think it was much to do with your fantastic film poster landing perfectly into an open-air cinema. Such drama to be had, such fun. All you needed was a TEFL. What do you say, Sister
I'm
Rebecca?
trying to think about what they were trying to achieve. I mean, were they trying to actually having a laugh? So they didn't actually want to shut the cinema down because, I mean, that's what would have been foremost in my mind, would be to somehow stop the noise, stop the films. But they just wanted to create panic and pandemonium in an unstable country.
They were just having fun.
Yeah, I think it's all about context, really. I think that if they'd done it somewhere, you know, in a stable country, not in a packed cinema, perhaps, it would have been all right. But I think that I can see why people in the cinema crowd would have been rather frightened to see a thing that looked like an aeroplane coming directly into the crowd. They didn't know that. So I think because of that,
it's got a poster on it. They
probably didn't take the time to look at the poster too closely. Sorry, Ted, you're not forgiven.
See, I totally agree with Rebecca. It could have created an international incident.
It's a paper
We
plane.
could have been at war within minutes. I think it was totally, utterly, and highly irresponsible, and not funny in the least. It probably had a big point on the end. It probably could have stabbed somebody.
It was made of paper.
No, it was cardboard.
Look, I've made
It was cardboard, Simon Mayo.
I've made a plane out of this confession.
It doesn't look anything like that.
It's an international incident.
It was about 9 times bigger than that. A very nasty cardboard, which can actually be very injurious.
Very nasty cardboard, which can be
injurious. Your plane flew very well. I'm impressed. And you made it in about 5 seconds.
That's true.
Yeah, and it went 3.5 inches. A big cardboard thing going into a crowd of people. Anyway,
would have been absolutely terrifying. I entirely agree.
Forgiven.
OK. Brother Matthew, we'll look to you for a bit of
I once took home a studio or a sort of movie poster, and but all I wanted to do was try and impress girls with it. It was in French, and it was Dead Poets Society. It never worked. So for that reason, I am not going to forgive.
It was a Dead Poets Society?
I wouldn't blame the poster, Matt.
Yes, well, yeah, it was very poor. It was, oh dear, yeah. Oh, it's all coming back to me now.
All the memories.
Yes. So, for that reason, yes, bad memories. That's why I am not going to forgive. No.
Do you think we might get... I think open-air cinema might be quite an interesting...
Yes.
An interesting
area.
area.
Very tight niche.
Yes, open-air cinemas, paper plane cinemas.
Yes. Paper planes.
Yeah. Egypt.
Yeah, be very careful about those, yes.
So it's confessions at bbc.co.uk, but first of all, the people's verdict is due now. Do you forgive Ted or not? I suspect you might be more forgiving than the hard-hearted crew here. How scary can it be? Look, it's a big cardboard thing coming.
Get a grip.
What are you checking there, Matt?
The FIFA decisions coming through. It'll come through during the confession.
Well, obviously there's only one place for your attention to be.
Obviously.
And that is on the confession.
Obviously,
So-
yes, it will be.
So
Yeah.
shall we have the family rule? Shall we?
Shall I turn it off?
Mobiles
while we're on?
off at the table.
There we go.
Yeah.
Off. Done.
Okay, thank you. Anyway, here's tonight's tale. You don't want to miss this. This is from Dr. S. Thank you, Dr. S. Dear Father Simon and the Holy Orders, Sister Rebecca will possibly cope with this story, but I'm afraid the Mother Superior is going to be shocked by my tale. Matt, as has been reported, has the morals of a sewer.
You're going to be fine.
So here goes. This is anonymous because my father was an MP in the 1970s. There you go. Have we got your attention?
Oh, yes.
I'll leave it that vague because this confession took place in the hallowed confines of the House of Commons itself. Have I got your attention now? My sister and I were both very young at the time of our sin. Or maybe my sin. I'll let you decide. We didn't visit Westminster that often because of the travel involved, and our dad's holidays were longer than ours. By the time we broke up, Dad was already off and working on constituency business. We were very proud of our dad, and all we understood of what he did was that he made laws and got to sit at the front of our school plays. He was a big man in our town, and it was common for people to shout things at him as we walked around. Whatever they said, he would always wave cheerily. My sister and I learnt a few new words this way. Anyway, I forget why we were all in the House of Commons, but it was probably some big occasion that meant the MPs could have their family with them. As you know, Father Simon, it is an impressive building to Londoners and people who see it every day, but to our eyes it was like something from a fairy story. Everywhere we looked, there were important-looking people, some in strange uniforms. Our jaws were on the floor and our eyes were wide. We saw the Speaker's procession, and a large number of men in suits greeted my father as we passed. I remember him striding purposefully to his office, with my sister and I struggling to catch up. Once there, we were surprised how tiny it was, and that he was sharing it with another MP, who I also will not name. Such intrigue. This other MP wasn't there, so it was just the three of us. Dad made himself some tea and offered us a biscuit. We sat on the floor, not daring to touch anything. There were books, papers, magazines everywhere. Ashtrays were overflowing, but we still sat cross-legged, trying to catch the biscuit crumbs as they fell. After a phone call, our father said he had to attend to some business, and we were to stay put. See, capital letters, this bit. On no condition were we to go for a walk. We nodded sternly and promised. My father had been gone barely a minute when my sister, grinning madly, leant over to me and said the words which are the basis for this confession. I'll give you £1 if you streak down the corridor.
Oh, superb.
Well, as I said, this was the 70s and there had been quite a lot of streaking at sports occasions and the like, but I'd never been tempted. But £1 was a good way of getting some money back then, and I found myself thinking about it. Why don't you do it? I said. What, and give myself £1? Don't be stupid. If you don't want the money, fine. And she turned away. Scaredy cat, she said. Where's the money? I said. I'll do it if you give me the money now. To my surprise, she produced a note. And that was that. I was trapped. And that was how I found myself running, naked as the day I was born, full pelt down one of what I imagine were magnificent, ornate, historic corridors of Westminster. Corridors that might once have been graced by Churchill, Gladstone and Wilson were now host to a naked lad from the north. I would like to add that I scared families and doddery old lords as I ran, but to my great relief, no one saw me. Ha-ha, no one! Back in my dad's office, as I pulled my clothes back on, I felt for the pound coin in my trouser pocket, but it had gone. Pound note, that should be, sorry, pound note in my trouser pocket, it had gone. Where's my money? I wailed. You didn't touch the end wall, said my evil sister. You only get 50p. Except that my horrible sister didn't have 50p on her. I seem to remember I started to cry at this point. My sister knew I would hardly complain to my dad. Though I was upset because I'd streaked. So that was that. The rest of the day was spent with me pinching my sister and her reporting me to my dad. And I was the one who ended up in trouble. So forgiveness, please, from my father, who potentially had trouble at work, and to the spirits of Parliament, who had probably not witnessed that amount of streaking over the centuries. My sister, you won't be surprised to learn, is a dentist.
What?
Evil dentist.
Oh, right, I see. Right,
Evil
okay.
and taking money from I suppose.
Apparently, yeah.
Of course, some dentists do it quite legitimately and with good cause.
And they're not evil.
And they're not evil, apparently. Forgive me, please. And her while you're at it, says Dr. S. Well, you know, I was trying to. I don't think I've ever had a streaking confession. I don't think there's been a streaking confession. But anyway, Mother Superior.
Can I just want to ask one question?
Yes.
How old were they? Did I miss that at the beginning? Or
very,
do they know?
very young is the only clue, and the fact that he bursts into tears at the end.
Oh.
Well, that doesn't mean young necessarily, does it?
34.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's no. My guess is very young, but you know. Yes,
I'm sure they've seen far worse in the corridors of Parliament. I'm sure they've seen streaking adults on many occasions.
Secretaries
I mean,
and
you know what goes
members of
on there.
Parliament.
It's a cesspit of,
Is it?
bad behaviour.
Wow.
Apparently.
There we go.
Well, if you're listening to the news at 5, it wasn't particularly great, but
Revelations aplenty here.
So I think it's
cesspit.
absolutely fine.
no
I
wonder this
think-
country's going to the dogs if we're led by a cesspit.
I think it's absolutely fine. And also, I mean, I think the sister is the one who needs to be in the dock. She didn't say that he had to touch the wall, did she?
No, she just says streak down the corridor.
Exactly. I mean, she changed the rules after he'd already done it. I think that's really unfair. So I think it's fine and it's fun and no one saw you anyway and no
I
one
bet
got
she
a shock.
says. I bet she says you need a couple of crowns. Oh, while I'm here, you need another 6.
Exactly.
That's
So
exactly
you
what
are
it is.
completely forgiven.
Yeah,
I
think
so love Rebecca's superior moral tone. It's a cesspit of bad behaviour.
Well, you work in the cesspit, don't you? The travel unit.
Well, no, absolutely. But I think, the BBC in general, do you think? I mean, it has its own corridors of
Licentiousness.
Absolutely. I've seen streaking in the BBC. I've seen it in the lifts, actually. Yeah. Oh,
Who from?
I can't.
Alan Dedico is my guess. Just as a guess.
No, I don't think. I think I wouldn't have survived if I had
okay.
seen Alligator naked.
Who was it then?
Oh, I can tell you so many things about what goes on in lifts, but I won't.
Did it make a story in the papers?
No.
Okay, might do one day.
Anyway, this is yes, I'm sure. I'd like to have known the ages, though, because my guess is about 8 or 9, that kind of an age,
Sounds about
when
right.
perhaps you probably wouldn't have known any better. So, and the idea of a pound note.
Yeah.
Or a 50p coin. I don't think they were simultaneous, to be honest. 50p's and pound notes weren't at the same time.
Well, decimalisation was 669, wasn't
Yeah. But I don't think they existed. Did they, Rebecca, side by side? I don't think they
it?
did.
Pound notes and 50. I think that. Anyway, this is not the heart of the story.
No, it's not, but I am going to forgive because they were young and didn't know any better and wanted, frankly, a bit of excitement with a really boring dad by the sound of
Be
it.
young, be foolish, and be happy, brother Matt.
And be naked in the corridors of Parliament. Well done. This is a great story. What a way for us to end the week. Superb. I haven't laughed at that for a long time. That was brilliant stuff. Definitely going to forgive. That is brilliant. Get a laugh like that. Superb.
I think evil sister stories. I think that's what this. Have you been reading your?
I
phone?
have. Sorry.
Do you know anything that we've
No,
been talking
I just
about?
said the naked bit. And
I'll give you a pound if you streak down the corridor.
Yes. Yeah.
So look, if there are House of Commons confessions to be had, I think we definitely need to have them.
Yes.
I'm not sure how many will come our way, but that would be very nice. And I think that there is a streaking I think there could well be some other streaking confessions.
Oh, we'll take all the streaking confessions you've got.
We'd like
Absolutely.
them to be sort of upright and decent, you know.
No, not really.
if at all
No,
possible.
I'll take all of them.
And that's your lot for this week. one fewer than normal because I was ill. That's basically what it boils down to. Don't forget the Daily Mayo podcast. It's available Monday to Friday after the show. And for more confessions, bbc.co.uk/radio 2. Look for the drive time pages. Send your confession in. You know we're waiting.
This is a download from the BBC. To find out more, including our terms of use, go to bbc.co.uk/radio 2.